Welcome back to the next episode of our podcast. We're glad you came back. We're happy you found us. Hopefully, you watched our first episode from last week, and we're just excited to have a second episode because that means we're on track. It's 1 week later. For anybody who's wondering, it is March 12th. It is the start of the league season, and wow, so much action over the last 3 days. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, guys, just your initial thought of the last 3 days of everything that's gone on, not in detail, but just your initial thoughts of everything.
Well, I mean, look, I'll tell you. For me, I think I'm encouraged by a lot of what I've seen for the team in the last couple of days, and we'll get more in depth into that. But there's a couple things I might question, and again, we'll talk about it. But overall, I feel like there have been some good moves, but a lot, I think a lot has happened here in a couple of days.
Yeah, Joe,
I'm
what you got?
thrilled with what we're doing. I love seeing the fact that we're trying. We're doing what we can. We're not just trying to make big splashes with big names, and we're not doing what we used to do, where it's like, hey, let's get the most expensive guy, bring him in. We've got money, we've got room. I'm thrilled that we kept some of the guys we wanted. We lost a couple that I would have liked to have kept, but
Right.
You can't keep them all.
Well, so there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 moves total between players they re-signed, signed as free agents, or traded for, and that does not include Debo. That does not include the Debo trade, which was made official today on the first day of the league season. So there is a lot. I mean, that's 15 signings. I think they had to replace 28 or 30 players or something like that. We brought back 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 8 people, 9 people, depending on how you want to classify one of them. But but a lot of new faces again, a lot of 1-year contracts again. That's the type of thing that makes me worry because it just means we have to go through this again next year.
Okay, I'm with you on that, but I'm actually encouraged by the 1-year deals. For one thing, and again, we'll get to some of them. Some of these I'm like, are these guys like a lot of those 1-year deals? They're not younger guys, so they almost have to perform to keep earning their way back.
Yeah,
and you're right. Yes, so we have to go through this again next year. However, one of the things I was thinking about earlier today is I think players are more willing to take a 1-year deal with the team now than they would have been 2 years ago, where it was a toxic place to be. They see us as a potential contender. And I think players actually want to be here to try. So they'll take the 1-year deal, be willing to take that 1-year deal to prove themselves and earn maybe a longer term deal, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. I mean, sometimes that can work in the team's favor. This was my concern last offseason, was that we got all these players and that's great. You're bringing in these people, but if we don't if you don't re-sign them, then you're starting all over again and you lose whatever chemistry you built. And that was a big thing for this team, was team chemistry. And so if you have a whole lot of turnover, if you have turnover of 20 or 25 players every year, how do you keep chemistry? So that's my concern. It's not a major one, but it's a concern.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we're seeing all these 1-year deals, but I look at some of the names that are involved. Mariota, Tressway, even Zach Ertz. These are older players,
right?
So it's just, I don't know. It doesn't worry me as much. These aren't guys who I think are gonna like. I guess there's a little talk of Mariota going other places. He's not. I think he's good as a backup at this point in his career. So, and who knows? We probably don't need him next year.
But Joe, you said you were happy about everything. Do you have any concerns at all about any of this?
Well, I was happy about, in the general sense, in the direction we're headed. The 1-year, I totally agree with you. The 1-year deals are odd to me because it's kind of like, why are you going to put all this money and effort into bringing in someone for 1 year? It's like, why not try to lock someone in? Like, if Debo Samuel's worth it, why are we only going to do 1 year with him? Why wouldn't we sign him longer But I guess with him, that was a trade, and that was what he had left on the contract, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's not a great example, but it's like, I don't know. You're right. The 1 year deals are disheartening in some sense, where it's like you don't get the chemistry. We're doing this every year. We find people we really like. We're losing a few players that we wanted to hang on to. Like I'm going to miss number 11, Chin, because I thought he was doing great for us.
Yeah, I think
someone else that De'Ami Brown, he could have been worthwhile. We lost him too. And he started to play better in the second half of the season. The first half he wasn't great, but he started to pick things up. And
I agree with you, and I don't think he's worth what he got. So I'm glad we didn't try to match that.
I think we touched on him last week a little bit about that. Is that I didn't think we'd be able to afford him,
right.
and that's the thing. Is someone was going to potentially overpay to get him because they need receiver help, and so they'll roll the dice and try and make him a number 2 receiver or something like that. And I liked him. I always liked him from when they drafted him. I wish he had produced more, and if he had, then he would probably still be here. If you're waiting until the back half of the last season of your contract or what have you, that's almost too late. And apparently it was too late.
Well, it definitely is. Yeah. Well, he was a Rivera pick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So no surprise. I don't know if anyone's left on the team that he picked.
Cosme. So
you had to think about that one.
Okay, so let's go into the players and all the signings. So I got a list because there's no way I could memorize all this stuff, right? I couldn't even begin to. So Zane Gonzalez, the kicker, they re-signed him. I know he was on the team last year, but they went through like 17 kickers last season or something like that,
yes,
right?
They did. Yep.
Okay, so is he the guy, or is he just was the easiest guy to re-sign, or do we even care at this point who the kicker is?
He's got his little tick thing that just was like brought a lot of attention to that, didn't he? I think one of the things that really the thing that bothers me the most about him, he's wearing a Chris Cooley jersey. He's got number 47 and he's a kicker, and it's like, how does this work?
Okay. Setting aside his weirdo-ness, the other kicker, wasn't that Austin Siebert, who got injured and then Zane took the place for him? Isn't that what it was?
I think, like Rob said, we went through like 17 kickers last year. I don't remember. That
sounds right, Mike. That does sound, I think, somewhat familiar. I mean, they had injuries to kickers. Yes, that was part of the problem. So I don't know. I'm not as worried about kickers as I would have been, say, 5 or 10 years ago, because more teams go for 2 nowadays on a regular basis because of analytics or something. So, I mean, I don't think it's as important. Like, how many times did Washington go for it on 4th down last season when a lot of us were sitting back saying, just kick, take the points, kick, but they just kept going for it and ended up scoring a touchdown. So we all look stupid because they scored a touchdown instead of 3 points and blah, blah, blah. So is kicker really as important as it used to be? And so and we've probably already spent too much time talking about kickers, but
we definitely have, yeah.
Okay, so
you want to spend another 5 minutes on the punter that we just re-signed?
Well, yeah, well, but in fairness, Tressway is worth 5 minutes. I mean,
yes, he is.
I mean, look, I'm wearing the jersey.
The jersey. So it would have been fitting because Joe, you have the Daniels number 5 jersey. Mike, you have Tressway number 5. I wish I had a Kurt Knight number 5 jersey. You guys don't even know who that is, but he was the kicker before Mosley. I know you know who Mosley is. So there you go.
Maybe. Did McNabb wear 5 when he was playing for us?
We try to block that those seasons out of our memory, Joe. So thank you for traumatizing.
We need to remember those seasons so we don't let it happen again.
I would like the record to reflect that I was just triggered by Joe.
All right. Fair enough.
I'll drink twice for
Joe.
14 or something. But
So literally at the beginning of this podcast, you talked about dumb shit we did in the past, like overplaying for players that were past their prime. Say that 4 times fast. That's an example.
yeah, McNabb was the third worst trade of the last 40 years. But that's okay. So back to Tressway, because that's more important. So they re-signed Tress, but he only signed a 1-year contract. So again, this is the guy who arguably has been the team's most valuable player over the last couple seasons. Yes, you could say Terry has been. I get that. I'm not trying to compare the two, but I mean, what Tress has done game in and game out of, punts inside the 20 and that type of thing. And he's just got a 1-year contract. It's not like he had a bad year last year. It's not like he was injured. And he's a punter, so he can punt till he's like 60 or something. So I don't understand why a 1-year contract with that.
I don't either. I'm curious about that because do you know how much it was? How much it was?
3 million, I think, wasn't it?
It's not a. Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, it's not a ton of money. So what? Give him 3 years, 10 million?
I thought last year, I thought he did have a little bit of a nagging injury, and there were times where he wasn't, they were letting him sit and going for it on fourth every time.
Well, or does this go back to the fourth down thing where, I mean, he didn't punt for the first couple of games, right? And do they need to invest that much in a punter? But I don't know. I'm not saying they needed to pay him $3 million a year or something, like I think there was a punter in Tennessee that they just signed for $3 million a year or something like that. But again, I think he was a very integral part of the team. I mean, obviously he still is, but again, it's a 1-year contract. So it's just those things that make me wonder. I'm not losing sleep over it, but it just, this is where I question what the brain trust is doing and the reasoning behind it, and maybe I'll never know. Okay, that's fine, but I question it.
I mean, I question that one. That feels like a little, even to do a 2 or 3 year deal. You're right. It's what, 7-8 million, but I don't know. Maybe it's not what he wanted. That is the only one that I kind of looked at. I'm like, why wouldn't you just get him locked up for a few years?
Right.
But he's been in the league for what, 10 or 11 years now, right?
He's
I don't know off the top of my head.
Probably. He's 34 years old, so that would be right. And that's what I'm like, but to your point, Rob, like if you're looking at a punter at 34 being like, how long do you sign someone at age? He's a punter. And he doesn't even punt that much, like we just talked about. He's barely on the field this season.
He's 11 seasons he's been in the league.
Okay.
And last year was the second fewest punts he has had in a season. So,
well, and maybe that's why, if we're punting less and less, we won't need a good punter.
I mean, like in 2022, he had 83 punts. In 2022, he had 83 punts. In 2023, he had 73 punts. Last season, he had 50 punts. So yeah, I mean, if they're getting away from that, it's kind of like the kicker. Does Washington need anybody who actually plays football with their feet?
I still think you need to make sure you have a damn good kicker. There's too many times you need those 3 points. There's too many times you need that extra point.
I agree with that, which is why I questioned the 1 year. Or we already spent too much time talking about kickers. Damn.
Yeah. Well, okay. The difference is the 1 year deal for Zane, I'm okay with because he's not Tressway level of performance. So I am okay with that. But yeah, Tress, I feel like we could have locked him up for 3 years. Okay. Anyway.
So we talked about Gonzalez. We talked about Tress. Mariota, they re-signed Mariota for a year. There was talk that he might get, because when he played last season, he did play well when he came in for Daniels. There was talk that, some of these quarterback hungry team might try and sign him either to compete or to be their backup. I'm glad he's sticking around because I think he built a nice bond with Jaden Daniels. I mean, you heard Daniels talk about that a lot. And so I'm happy he's staying. And again, for that, I understand a 1 year contract because he's your backup quarterback. maybe they draft another quarterback in the 6th round or 7th round this year or something like that to start grooming to be the next backup. Who knows? But like I think that we're on a 1-year contract was good.
I 100% agree. I could just ditto. I mean, yeah.
I mean,
It sounded like he was a good mentor for Daniels, so I think it's great to have him, keep him around,
and let's
show him how to be a professional. Not that Daniels has had any issues with that. Nothing like what's his name over in the Colts,
Richardson.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything I've read says the same thing, that Jaden really likes him. He's been a good mentor. He's great for him. So yeah, I think that was a great signing.
Okay, so good. We're happy with that. All right. So Bobby Wagner.
Next.
Bobby Wagner. What do we got for Bobby Wagner?
I love the relationship he has in the locker room, that you see the camaraderie, the way he's like a big brother to Daniels, where they're talking trash to each other during interviews. It's like, and he produced on the field too. I mean, he was doing great. He reminds me very much of London Fletcher, and I think everyone kept comparing those two. The senior guy coming in here, doing his thing, being a great player, and showing the young guys how to do it. And then it sounds like he's just great in the locker room. I'm glad he's back. Do they only do 1 year for him as well?
That's what I was just pulling up. Yeah, it's a 1-year contract for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess it's his age.
Well, see, I thought last year, this is what bothered me from last year. I thought last year, like, I was excited that they were bringing him in. I didn't understand why it was only for a 1-year contract. If you're bringing someone like that in to help change the locker room and show that veteran leadership, and you only bring him in for 1 season. Now, I realize he's resigned, so it wasn't just 1 season. But if you're only signing him for 1 season, then what happens when he leaves? Can you really establish so much change in 1 season? So I had hoped last year they would have signed him to a 2-year or maybe even, with a 3rd-year option or something like that, because I think he's probably got this year and at least 1 more year in him. And I would have liked to have seen a 2-year contract this year. Again, they don't have anybody ready to replace him yet. So a 2-year contract to me, maybe a little more guaranteed money, but less overall or something. I know we're not going to try and get too deep in contract details, but I mean, that factors into how long you would sign someone for. So, but I'm happy. I'm tickled he's back. I think it's a great move.
I wonder if the whole mentality of the team right now with Adams is just drafting, building a team from young guys, and just give these 1-year contracts to the older guys as stopgaps.
So, I mean, that was kind of what he had said, right? They were going to draft, they were going to build a team, things like that. But then, I mean, look, we just talked about Tressway, Bobby Wagner, and we'll talk about Zach Ertz. They're all 34 years old. So they're signing these older guys, and it's a lot of what you guys were just talking about. Having the maturity and presence in the locker room is good for the team, but they are also feels a little to me like a win it now. We want to capitalize on Jaden's early years, and so that is actually the only concern I have. And nothing they've done makes me think this, but is that if we've seen it in the past where we're like, got to win it now. Well, not just with this team, but with lots of teams, and they start doing dumb stuff because they're just trying to win right now, this year, got to win it. I don't think that's what this stuff is, but I do think part of that is some of these 1-year deals with the older guys is they want to try to at some point place them with younger guys. Now they gave up a bunch of picks for Tunsil, but we'll talk about it later.
Well, yeah, I mean, they just traded away a bunch of picks between Lattimore, Debo, and Tunsil. So yes, that's my concern is you've traded away all these picks, and so how are you going to get younger if you don't have the draft picks? Now, I don't want to go too much into the draft right now or anything like that because I think that's a whole nother subject. So we'll kind of cut off there and just say we're all happy that Bobby Wagner's back. He's back for at least 1 more year. We know that, and we're happy about that, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So
Jeremy, I think the next one you should do is Zach Ertz because I think that's the same line.
Okay, so Zach Ertz. Go ahead, Joe. I mean, what do you got?
Well, I was actually surprised he was coming back because I thought at the end of the championship game last year or last season, I thought there was rumors he was going to retire. So
Oh, I
I'm
never heard anything like that. I
Oh,
assumed
I
he was
didn't know
coming
that.
back.
well, maybe I'm full of crap and you guys didn't hear it. I don't
So
know.
okay, but you no, I'm not saying you're wrong. You may have heard that. I definitely thought he not only was coming back but wanted to come back.
Yes.
But then I also wonder if some of that is, and like I said, he's 30, I believe 34 as well. And if some of that is, if you're a guy at 34 years old, you're at the tail end of your career, but you're in a team where you had a year. I mean, presumably you enjoyed the year here with this team, and you're looking at going, you know what, these guys could be contenders in the next year or two. Maybe I'll do another year or two to see if I can't get a Super Bowl.
Well, he said so. Mike, you're right. He is 34. He said that playing with Jaden like revitalized him, and he wished he had been able to play with him longer. So, and the fact that Zach made it through the season, he wasn't injured, where he's had a little bit of an injury history. He made it through. He had a real good season. It was a strong performance, and so you look at this a couple different ways. One, did Zach want to come back? Yes, I think he wanted to come back all along. Once he got into the season, like maybe he thought, okay, I'll just have one. I'm going to go help Cliff out, my old coach. I'm going to go play with him for one season. It buys them a season as they're getting, everything figured out. But then he started having fun again. And so he wanted to come back and he wants to keep playing. And maybe, and I haven't heard this, but maybe he's thinking this season and maybe another season. Who knows? But the other side of that is what the team is thinking, and they don't have anybody to replace him. So, they drafted
Isn't John Bates?
Bates is not he's not a receiving tight end.
He's a blocking tight end, right?
He's a blocking tight end. So they drafted Sinnott or however you say his name. I should know his name since he's on our team. They drafted him. He was supposed to be the guy. He was supposed to be a beast, right? And he didn't really do anything last season. So I think that was part of the reason that the team wanted to bring Ertz back, and his relationship with Jaden Daniels. You hear it all the time. His security blanket. Over the middle. I mean, how many times did Zach catch a pass on third or fourth down for a first down? It seemed like he was doing that every single game. So I don't think they have anybody to replace him yet. We'll go to Bates next since we're kind of talking tight ends. But I mean, I'm again like Wagner. I'm happy as hell he's back.
Yeah, it sounds like he was. I think just reiterating what you said, it sounded like he was the security blanket just to be there, do his thing. And, a good tight end is so hard to pass up. I mean, like,
yes,
they hit someone, they walk out 5 yards, they turn around, they're open, they catch the ball, they fall 2 more. You get 7 yards on every play.
It's perfect. It's just the way I drew it
up. I love a good tight end like that.
All right. So let's transition then into John Bates, who they re-signed. He actually got a 3-year contract. He's a younger guy, so that probably plays into that somewhat.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys remember this specifically, but when I look at, and I do this almost every year, back when Cooley was playing and stuff like that, but I forget who the other tight ends were with him. But back in the team's heyday, when they were winning Super Bowls, they had Clint Didier and Don Warren were their 2 primary tight ends. And Clint Didier was the first H-back. And if you don't know who Didier is, he's the guy that went in motion on Reagan's 43-yard touchdown run in Super Bowl 17 against the Dolphins. And he was a pass catcher. He went to Portland State. He was a receiver there. He had good hands. Don Warren was a blocking tight end. And so you have the one guy who's a blocking tight. He's like another tackle. And then you have your pass catching guy who is a bad matchup for safeties or a linebacker because he might be faster than a linebacker and he's bigger than a safety. And so that's what Ertz and Bates are to me. It's that 1-2 combination. You want to run the ball, you got Bates because he's going to knock somebody on their butt. He only caught, I think, 7 passes last year. You want someone to catch that 3rd down or 4th down pass to keep the drive going, Ertz is your guy. So I like that combination, but Bates is not going to be a pass catching tight end like Ertz or any other tight. I mean, like a Cooley. So that's the easiest thing for us to say.
That's the one I would know.
Yes.
I didn't realize. I didn't know who he was. Like John Bates, I don't know who he is. So I'm looking him up, and he's 6'6" and 260 pounds. So yeah, he's going to block and he's going to clear a hole for you. And
yeah, he's the blocking guy. And Ertz is like, you don't see guys like this in the NFL. So they were actually, I think there was some worry from the team that other teams might try and sign him away from Washington. So that's who John Bates is. So don't expect him to catch 60 passes in a year and a bunch of touchdowns, but he's gonna open a hole for whoever the running back is.
Yeah, whoever.
Yeah.
Speaking of running backs.
It's amazing how that works.
Nice. Yeah, nice transition there.
They re-signed 2 running backs, Nichols and Rodriguez, and I'm curious about this because I want to know. There's been talk that the team might look at drafting a running back, in the later rounds. Obviously, not in the first round, and probably not in the second round type of thing. But there are some good running backs out there. And, I said I got to talk about Virginia Tech. Tootin, the running back from Virginia Tech, had the fastest 40 time at the combine of any running back. I know we're not going to talk about these things, but shout out Hokies, blah, 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 blah. But, if they were to draft a running back, they re-signed Nichols, they re-signed Rodriguez. Rodriguez was obviously a backup. Throw that in. We don't know what's happening with Eckler. Well, Eckler's under contract, right?
I believe so.
Okay, so he's under contract. And what about Robinson?
I think he's still under contract too.
Yeah, I think both of them are still under.
Okay, so right now we have Robinson, Eckler, Nichols, and Rodriguez, which was our running back room last year. But there's talk of possibly drafting someone in the later rounds, and so I wonder, could Robinson be shown the door? Was he really that productive last year?
I would defend him for the first half of the season, but the second half of the season, there was I forget which game it was. He had like 3 fumbles in one game.
But that was like the first time he really fumbled. That was.
I understand. No, I know, and it was unusual, but it seemed like his productivity went down from that point, and it just seemed like he wasn't getting the yards. And again, were the holes not there from the offensive line, or because we were getting injured on the line, or was it Robinson, or I like B-Rob. I don't want to lose him, but
same. I like him too. Exactly. I will be curious to see with some of the other stuff, getting a better line in place, things like that, what that means for him next year. I would like to see him one more year, but yeah, you're right. If he's not producing, then maybe he does need to go.
Oh, see, I've never been super high on him. Not that I thought he was a bad player or anything. I didn't get the hype.
That's okay. You're allowed to be wrong every once in a while.
But I'm not wrong because he was brought in to replace Antonio Gibson, who was 1,000-yard rusher. So, but whatever. That's in the past now. But I wonder if they're
going to try.
I don't. It's not like I think Robinson's a bad player. I don't think that. I didn't get the hype for him. I thought he was overhyped for what he brought to the table.
Okay,
that
may be true, but also we have a tendency to do that in Washington, is get real hype over things.
Well, that's because we're experts.
That's correct.
I'm curious to see how the run game is going to change with Deebo Samuel, because he was supposed to be the wide receiver running back, right?
Well, and that's so that right. So there's another thing, okay, so we're going down a little bit of a tangent here because Deebo will play out of the. I don't think he's going to run the ball that much, but he can. He's that threat. He plays out of the backfield. And it's the same way when they had Robinson and Eckler in the backfield at the same time. That threw defenses because they didn't know what to do because both of them could run the ball. Eckler was more of the pass catcher than Robinson was, but you didn't know what to defend. And if you throw a Samuel into that, but if that's Samuel, then is he really our number 2 receiver, or is he more the gadget player type of thing? And I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole with this because we got so much other stuff to talk about. But this was my concern about running backs. Like, what are we doing here? What's the game plan? And I realize it's March, so there's plenty of time to figure this out. But I do have to.
We're probably at this point with McNichols and Rodriguez, we're talking about the number 3 and 4 running backs, right? So we're probably spending too much time talking about re-signing those guys. It is more like, look, I don't think either of them's a number 1, so it's more of a B-Rob and Eckler. What, do we need to do something different at that level?
Right. Okay. So and we'll talk about that later. All right. So we got rid of Nichols, we got rid of Rodriguez. And then the other player they re-signed, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this guy because none of us knew it was Seymour, Devon Seymour, I think is his name. He was a practice squad player. He was suspended 6 games for using performance-enhancing substances. I had never heard of him. I didn't even know he was on the team. They must see something in him if they re-signed him, because I always question any player that gets suspended for doing something like performance-enhancing substances, or like when players would get suspended for smoking weed and stuff like that, when you're being tested and you're not supposed to smoke. Like, I question any player that does that. I don't care what their talent level is and whether or not that should be someone on a team that I'm running, but I'm not running a team. But that's all I have to say on that. I don't know enough about the guy to say one thing one way or the other.
Same.
Okay.
We've already spent too much time on him.
Okay, so that's all the players that they re-signed. So we got 5 players that they signed, and that's, I'm going to name them: Will Harris, Eddie Goldman, Jonathan Jones, Javon Kinlaw, and Dietrich Wise. And I'll be honest, I think I'd heard of one of those guys before the last few days, maybe 2.
Okay, that's fair.
But I also don't follow other teams a whole lot, so that would explain that. Will Harris, we'll start there. He's a safety, was signed. He spent some time in Detroit, I believe, and New Orleans. And he's your replacement for Jeremy Chin. I mean, straight up, he's the replacement there. Joe, you had started talking about that. What can you expand on what you're thinking about with that?
Well, sorry to see Chin go, but bringing in Harris, I don't know anything about him other than I saw a couple things saying, reminding us that he's Lattimore's former teammate when they were both on the Saints, and having a safety and a cornerback, good communication in the backfield always is a plus. So if they worked well together and they get along and they can do their whatever they need to do, verbal or nonverbal communication when handing off wide receivers, and work well as a team, then more power to us.
Okay.
So, but I don't know anything about him as, other than that he was teammates with Lattimore.
And I agree with what you said. That's assuming that Lattimore plays and he's not injured.
Correct.
Yeah. Or gets ejected from a game or anything like that.
Right. Okay. So, I don't even know what position some of these guys play. They're all like defensive linemen, right? Well, Eddie Goldman's a defensive lineman, right?
Yes.
And Dietrich Wise is a defensive end. That just happened probably 20 minutes before we started recording this. But let's talk about the big signing, which was Javon Kinlaw. And he came from the Jets. He gets a 3-year contract. It's $30 million guaranteed, $45 million overall. I've never heard of this guy, but the experts online were more than happy to tell me that he was drafted by Peters in San Francisco. And so Peters knows him, so he knows what he's getting, which is good because I don't think anybody else knows what we're getting with this guy.
Yeah. And look, that is a theme with their, Peters and bringing in people they know. I get it, but I think we overpaid for him. And look, I hope to be proven wrong. I hope he turns out to be a rock star and does great things over the next, what is it, 3 years? Um, but I just think I 45 million, 15 million a year, I just think it was too much for him. So
Well, it's not exactly 15 million a year. I mean, it doesn't come out that way for the salary cap. I forget.
okay.
I know what you're saying. So what he is so it's 30 million guaranteed. In 2025, it's 7.5 million. It's 18.4 in 2026 and 19.1 in 2027. And this is what I always love when they report these contracts. The team would save 13.6 million in 2027 if he was cut after the second year. So it's really 7.5 for the first season, 18.4 for the second season, and then we'll see what happens. So you could almost say it's 30 million for 2 years potentially if it doesn't work out.
Okay. That's
Does that make sense?
30 million. It does. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And I know a lot of that is like manipulating the cap, all that. But
Yes.
30 million for 2 years is still 15 million a year. I think we're paying too much for it. I think the guarantee was too much. But again, if the guy shows up and he's a rock star and does, then I'll be fine with it. It just feels
So
like a big number to me, and I feel like we overpaid.
do we think that with these defensive line signings, because Goldman is a defensive lineman, Wise is a defensive lineman, Wise is an edge, Goldman I think is a tackle,
Mhm.
and Kinlaw's a tackle. So is this kind of we knew we were going to lose Jonathan Allen, so we got to find a replacement. Yeah, they got Johnny Newton, who had a good season last year and for his rookie year, and the expectation is that he'll have an even better second year. But is this more like, oh crap, we lost Jonathan Allen, we gotta plug in something, so we have to do something, and this is what they did, is they got someone
I
that
think so.
Peters knew. And
Yeah.
did they bid against themselves on it? I mean, Mike, you obviously think that.
I mean, yeah, I do. And look, here's the thing: we're talking about one individual transaction. On the whole, I don't think they've done a lot of dumb stuff. So if we come out of this year and this is the only one, and again, I hope he proves me wrong. But if we come out of it and this is the one where you go, maybe it was a few million more than it should have been, I won't care.
Yeah, so if they're
It's
10
only
for
money.
11 on their moves, then we're all good with that.
Well, and if this is the 11th one where it's that we slightly overpaid, then okay, who cares? It's almost rounding.
Well, and he's coming in as he's going to be helping with the run defense, right? And we were one of the worst run defense teams.
Right. So well, hopefully that's what he's here for, because yes, that's what we need help. I mean, that's
so. I mean, we really only one way to go is up.
Okay.
So maybe we didn't over. I mean, I'm with Mike. The money thing is always an aspect, and but if he does his job and he does it well, then he's worth his weight in gold.
Well, I've never heard of the guy, so I can't say anything. So I automatically think he's overpaid if I've never heard of him.
That's fair.
And look, here's the other thing: like the overpaying part is at some point it's somebody else is spending money to give him that money. It only bothers me when it becomes a cap issue. We're not there right now, so overpaying for a player or two this year may not matter if we're able to get the pieces we need and stay under the cap.
But that's the thing, is when you look at this, I mean, it's 7 million, it's 13 million, it's 19 million, whatever. It's increasing. Those are big jumps that it doesn't affect, it might not affect the cap this year, but how would it affect the cap next year or the year after that? And that's where you have to be careful with these things, because you say we have all this cap space this year, so we're okay. But when you start signing these contracts, you end up like the New Orleans Saints, and you end up in cap
go up like $100 million in 5 years.
What's that?
I said I think the cap went up like $100 million over the course of 5 years.
Right, but we have to remember,
Okay,
everyone went into this saying, "Oh, Washington has $80 million in cap space, or now it's $100 million in cap space." That's great, but we had to sign 30 new people. So, when you start
yeah, but look,
taking
here's
on
the
these contracts, they add up very quickly. And so, again, I don't know enough about them to say it's bad, but I also don't know
but
enough
here's
to
the
say
thing.
it's good.
If we get into a year or even two and he is not turning out to be a $15 million a year player, essentially, or I guess 19 million by the end of it, then they cut him. Yeah, pay money, but it comes, you just get rid of it. So
Well, that's the common theme that I get, and it's the thing that bothers me, because if one of your highlights in talking about signing a player to a multi-year contract is that if he doesn't pan out in a year or two, you cut him, and here's the only penalty you pay, I think it's a bad signing. It goes
Yeah,
back to
we talked about that
Carson
before.
Wentz. They traded away a second and a third, or whatever it was, 2 seconds, to get Carson Wentz. And the big selling point was, if it doesn't pan out, we could cut him after a year and there's no cap hit. Yeah, but you spent all those draft picks. And I know there was no draft picks.
yeah,
And I'm not.
that's difference. But that's very different. We could talk about that with Tunsil because I think we gave up too much for Tunsil, and those are draft picks, and that's real. The money part is somebody else's money, and if that's what they choose to do, okay. I mean, I get what you're saying. We didn't give up anything for him except for money.
Right. I get that. I get that. I'm not trying to tear up the move or anything like that. Again, for me, it's always, if something seems screwy, I'm going to question it. And if I'm wrong, then great. I'll say I was wrong. Yeah, in 2 years, if he's made a Pro Bowl and he's got a couple of sacks and the run defense is shored up, then we can come back and someone could say, "Hey, Rob, remember that podcast on March 12th, 2025, and you said you weren't real happy about this?" And I'll say, "Well, that's not exactly what I said, but yeah, I'm glad they signed him."
Look, if they are the number one defense against the run next year, then I will sit here in a year and say I was wrong. That was a great signing, and we did not overpay.
Well, I like your optimism that we're going to still be doing this in a year. So for that, it's worth it.
I'll at least admit it to you two.
Okay, so the only other player, I just want to touch on something with one of the other players that they signed, and that's Eddie Goldman. And just because this gives me concern. So Goldman, during the COVID year, he took off the COVID year, and he retired at some point, and came back like he was gonna, like, so it says here, well, he's a DC native, so of course that counts for something. He was selected in the second round of the 2015 draft by the Bears. He spent the first 6 seasons of his career there. He's only played in 2 of the last 5 NFL seasons. He opted out of the 2020 season because of COVID, and was out of the league from 2022 through 2023 for a brief retirement. He spent last season with the Falcons, starting 10 games, totaling 16 tackles, 1 sack, and 3 quarterback hits. Now he's on a 1-year deal. So yeah, it's a 1-year deal. It's no big deal. It's not like he signed, and it's not like it's a $20 million deal. Hopefully they're seeing something in this guy that he's not going to quit on them like he quit before. I mean, he's getting older. I say quit. I mean, but
it looks like it looks like it's just another body to stick in front of a runner to try to slow him down.
Maybe it's a depth move.
We need those guys.
Move. So that's fine. I just wanted to throw that out there because I found that very interesting that he sat out the COVID season and then retired for 2 years and came back. And I just find that a little weird. And so that's why I brought it up. That's all. I don't have anything else to add on it. I just wanted to throw that out there for general information. Okay, so we've talked about the players they re-signed. We talked about the new players they signed. So we got one last thing, and that's the Tunsil trade. So I don't have the list in front of me what they gave up, but my question. So I have multiple questions about this, and I'll try and do one at a time so we can talk about it.
Hold on, I think I have it here.
Okay.
I believe We got Tunsil on a 4th-round pick.
Yes.
We gave up a 2025 3rd and 7th round pick and a 2026 2nd and 4th round.
Okay. So I'm not. I don't know how happy I am. I wouldn't say that I'm happy about this trade. I wouldn't say I'm unhappy about the trade, but I got a lot of questions. My first one is this. You have Houston. They have their young stud quarterback in CJ Stroud, right? CJ Stroud was Jaden Daniels before Jaden Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, he was sacked the second most times in the league. Stroud was. And so what does Houston do? They trade their starting left tackle, their Pro Bowl tackle. The Pro Bowl doesn't mean as much as it used to, but they're the 5-time Pro Bowl tackle for some draft picks. And when you look at the draft picks, you got to remember Washington's drafting at the bottom of each round this year, and we're assuming they're going to be drafting at the bottom of each round next year because they're going to do so well. That why would, if you're trying to protect your stud quarterback, why are you trading your Pro Bowl tackle? Tackles don't grow on trees. What? And it's not like he was in the last year of his contract. So that's my first question. Why? I don't understand. And I realize it's not our concern because it's not our team, but that sends up a red flag. It's like when Philly traded McNabb to Washington. Why would you trade your stud quarterback? And I realize he wasn't the stud when he traded him to a division rival. Well, Philly knew McNabb was done. That's why they did it. And they got Washington. They hosed us hard. And so, yes, I'm having flashbacks. What are we missing here?
I don't know. The only thing I heard about him, I was still hearing players, or excuse me, I was hearing some of the people online saying that this guy was probably the 2nd or 3rd best left tackle in the league still, which is interesting. But then they also said he also gets a lot of penalties.
He did. He had the most penalties of anybody in the league last year.
He did.
So, and why? And I'm with you. Why would Houston get rid of him if he's so damn good? Unless he's just too expensive, and they know they can get draft picks and unload salary cap.
But he's not that expensive, relatively speaking, for tackles, and he's got 2 years on his contract. I mean, you notice Washington didn't turn around and re-sign him for anything. Why would they? Because his cap hit is very friendly. It's very team friendly. So this is where I ask questions. I'm not questioning his talent. I'm not questioning his performance, although I don't like all the penalties. This is also the guy when the picture surfaced the day before the draft when he was drafted of him wearing a face mask with a bong attached to it.
Oh, that was him?
Yes, that was him.
First,
he's got good lungs, right?
Okay.
Oh,
his Twitter was hacked. His Twitter was hacked. People were messing with him. Also, that was a long time ago because I saw some of that stuff. I'm just not gonna judge him for stuff that happened that long ago. Like, let's look at what he's doing now. And look here, I have the same concerns with you as what we're giving up as far as picks for him, especially like a 2026 2nd-round pick. That's the one that I'm like, man, that's a pretty high pick for like. I mean, this year we're seem to be focused on free agent signings and things like that. So the longer term impact. Now, look, if he can be the guy we want at tackle and can protect Jaden, something that Joe, you and I have talked about it. Like this whole thing, Jaden needs protection. He's getting killed out there sometimes. If he can be that, then again, sort of like with Kinlaw, I will eat my words in a year. But I just feel like we gave up too much to get him.
Joe, what you got?
I don't know. It's hard to judge. It's one of these ones. It's like we can sit here day of and look at it and be like, yeah, we gave up too much. But if, just to make up something, if he doesn't allow Jaden to get sacked on his blind side the entire season, he's worth it, right? So,
right.
And I'm not saying that could happen or would happen or could happen. But it's like, it's so hard to look at this right now and be like, oh yeah, they're saying he's a good left tackle. If he can keep his penalties down and help block that side, then great. We need all the help we can get on the offensive line.
Yeah.
Our lines suck, both the defensive and offense. So, I, I, I don't know.
This
Wait
leads
and
me
see.
to my secondary question on the signing. And the offensive line for me last year was a big surprise. They did way better than I thought they would. And so when you look at this, like a lot of people question bringing Andrew Wiley back. And there was even talk that he could have been cut in the offseason to save cap space this year. But when you look at the offensive line, so this is what I'm wondering. You're bringing in Tunsil. He's going to play left tackle, right? So does that mean that the Brandon Coleman tackle experiment was a failure? Or are you going to move him to right tackle and cut Andrew Wiley? Or are you going to?
I thought I heard he was going to move to right guard. And that's actually maybe I'm looking at.
Okay, no, well, that's where I was going to go, is because remember, Wiley was more of a guard than he was tackle in Kansas City. And so with Cosme out and we don't know when he's going to be back, do you move Wiley into right guard and put Coleman at right tackle? And were you kind of forced to make a trade for a tackle because Lucas is gone? And Lucas was not the greatest starter, but Lucas was a great person to have as a swing tackle. He was a great third tackle, in my opinion. He's gone now. So I realized they needed some depth, but how do you think, and we're shifting out of this because we're kind of all on the same page, I think, about the Tunsil trades. We all, correct me if I'm wrong, we all think they kind of paid a little too much for it in draft capital, but we don't know how it's going to play out. It's too early. We're not grading the pick. We won't be able to grade it until at least get through the 2025 season and see how he does, right? Is that a fair statement?
Yep. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Totally.
So can we touch on the offensive line for a second then and how that plays out? Because Coleman, when he was drafted, it was more of, some people said he was a guard and not a tackle. And we went through this with Cosme because Cosme was drafted as a tackle and didn't pan out. So he was moved to guard. I thought Coleman did a decent job last year for a rookie playing left tackle. He wasn't all pro, obviously. He wasn't a Pro Bowl caliber player, but he was also a rookie. So if Tunsil is your left tackle, how do we think that's going to play out, Mike? How do you see the offensive line at the start of the season with the way things are right now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Coleman could shift to guard, and maybe that is the move. And I've seen other stuff that he could go to right tackle. So I really don't know. And I'm also curious to see what other moves they've got kind of coming. But I feel like Coleman might be movable. To your point, he was a guard. So, but yeah, I'm not sure right now. I have to look more at it.
All right, Joe.
I'm going to agree with what you were saying, Rob. I agree totally with what you said, that our offensive line last year surprised me that they did better than I thought they would. I'm trying to remember. So Cosme, he went down with an ACL at the end of the year, right? He may not be back this season.
Right, and that's the unknown. I mean, look, it used to be if you had an ACL, you were out for 12 to 18 months, and now it's obviously technology and treatment and everything is much better, and he could end up playing this season.
I just remember the last time we had a player have an ACL injury in the last game of the season. Then they rushed the recovery back, and then they didn't do so hot, and their name was RG3.
That's because the coach rushed him back because he was trying to save his job, and all he did was ruin a player's career and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And whatever. But
yeah, exactly.
I don't think they're going to rush Cosme back. I'm not worried about that. And that's why I wonder if this is a proactive move, because there was some talk of, is Allegretti's our left guard, was our left guard. Is he really, remember, he was a backup in Kansas City, I think it was. I think that's where he played before. Is he, did he do well? Could you move Coleman into the left guard position? And can Allegretti play right guard, or is there someone else that they're going to bring in? And there's still the possibility, obviously, that we still have the first and second round picks this year. That's a good place to draft an offensive lineman. And I'm not trying to dissect the draft, but so there's still options. Yes, it's still early. It's March 12th. I mean, and I realize, Mike, I asked you to kind of predict the offensive line, but that's why I said as things are right now.
Well, did you say Wiley has played guard too? So could he shift to right guard and then that kicks Coleman over to right
Yes.
tackle?
So Wiley, if
So
I remember correctly, Wiley was more of a guard in Kansas City than he was a tackle. He played guard, but he was the emergency tackle. If the tackle got hurt, Wiley went to tackle and they brought in a guard.
Okay, so there it is. So Coleman could shift over to right tackle, move Wiley to guard. Or
Yes.
if Allegretti is the one that needs to be replaced, Coleman could step in as the left guard as well. So
yes,
assume Cosme's not back in the beginning. So if we assume that,
I don't think he's going to be there for the start of the season. I think that's almost a given at this point.
So if that's the case, then you probably would move Coleman over to right tackle and slide Wiley over to guard.
Okay. I mean, I'm not
barring them doing anything else.
I'm not trying to say one thing's right or wrong. I'm just curious as to, like, what the thought is on this. From you guys and trying to figure out what the team thought might be, and they might just say, look, you can never have too many good players for your offensive line, and yes, for your defensive line, as Joe mentioned, but we're talking about the offensive line right now. So right now you have, and I'm just naming players. I'm not putting them in positions or where I think they're going to be. But you have Tunsil, you have Coleman, you have Biadasz, you have Allegretti, you have Wiley. So you have 5 guys. Allegretti's your center. That's a given. Tunsil, he's brought in. He's going to be the left tackle because otherwise you wouldn't have traded for him. So I think those two.
Who's our center?
Allegretti, not Allegretti. Biadasz.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So Biadasz is center, and Tunsil's your left tackle. And I think the other 3 positions are kind of in flux right now. And especially, like I said, I think some people had mentioned that Wiley was a candidate to be cut. For cap purposes. I think obviously the draft will tell us more about where they think they are with the offensive line, I think. And obviously there's still many other moves that could happen. As many moves we just talked about that happened in the last 3 days, there's still a lot more that could happen even before the draft. And then again, after the draft, and then you get into training camp and blah, blah, blah. But that's a whole nother story. That's podcast for a couple months from now.
Well, there's still a bunch of things happening. I mean, there's so many players that are now free agents that are cut, that are going to be cut, and there's going to be more cuts after. Is it June 1st? Is that a significant date for cap hits and things like that? So
that is correct.
I mean, there's so much that can go between now and the start of the season. So they got a big guy to play left tackle who supposedly is pretty good. Maybe we put too much, traded too much for him. If he can protect Jaden, hell yeah.
Yeah, and look, I know I was negative on 2 of the sort of transactions, but in general, I'm really pleased with what has happened in these few days. And obviously a ton has happened. But you're right, there's still more to come,
Well, I think this is kind of always been my thing is just because I question something doesn't mean I don't like it. Part of it is wanting to know the thought process from the team. And I realize we're not always going to get that. And that's frustrating to me. But do I need to know the offensive line today for the 2025 season? No, I don't. And it's kind of fun to talk about. And that's obviously what we're doing. I think they made some good moves. The re-signings that they made, I think overall very good. I think we're all in agreement on that. Some of the free agent signings, as we said at the beginning, between the 3 of us, we don't know a whole lot about all 5 of those players. So it's hard for us to say, hey, we approve wholeheartedly, and these guys are studs and they're dogs. That's what everyone's doing. They're dogs. They're Dan Quinn kind of players. They're dogs. And it's time will tell. That's why I don't get as excited anymore about draft picks or signings, because Tunsil may have had good years in Texas, and remember, he was originally drafted by Miami. But where is he in his career now? And I do, as I mentioned at the very beginning, why would a team that had their quarterback sacked the second most times in the league, they have traded away their stud left tackle? They also traded away another offensive lineman, but we're not here to talk about the Texans. But that left tackles are at such a premium in the league. I mean, we still have Washington fans that are visibly upset that Trent Williams is not here in Washington, because he's done so well in San Francisco after he was traded out of Washington. It's hard to find that starting left tackle that can be consistent and be a stud. And if you have them, you usually don't let them go. And so that's my question on the trade. And if that's the case, then why did we give up? If there's something wrong, did we give up too much? Yeah, Joe, you're right. If he comes in and has a solid season and doesn't give up tackle or doesn't give up sacks and doesn't commit a lot of penalties that kill drives, then he's worth the draft picks. Sure.
Right.
Even if it's just for 2 or 3 years, and maybe they can draft someone behind him eventually. But right now, I don't mind him coming in to join the team, but I question how it happened, I guess, is maybe.
It's what's really nice about this, with everything that's happened in the last week, especially the last few days, there's nothing that's making us go, shit.
Yeah.
We're sitting here and it's like, you're absolutely right, Rob. Why did they do that? And that's a great question. And we'll know why within a few weeks of the season. It's like, oh, they let him go because he wasn't great. Or we'll get to the end of the season and we'll be doing great and we'll be like, why'd they let him go? Like, he was awesome. So I for us to be able to sit here in March and say the only bad thing we can say right now is, I wonder why they did that. I think that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, we didn't have any, as Mike said before we started this, we didn't have any WTF moments. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
We're starting the year off right.
we're first day of the league season, and we're not scratching our heads completely, and no one's yelling WTF, and we're smiling.
We're almost 8 hours. We're 7.5 hours into the new league season, and we have not shit the bed yet. It's a win.
So that's, well, we've always been good at winning the off season. But this is good. Like I said, the positives for me, the big positives out of all these things that we listed, I'm looking at the list again, the ones that we talked about. I'm happiest about Wagner, Ertz, and Mariota coming back.
Yep.
I think those are the three big, like Tunsil. Yeah, he may. Joe, you're right. He may be the biggest score of the offseason. We won't know, but the other three that I mentioned, I think that's huge for this team. I mean, Tress, yes, as well, but if the team's not punting, then we don't need a punter. But I think Wagner coming back, Ertz, and Mariota, those three players have great connections with Jaden Daniels. That's who this team is now. It's Jaden's team. So let's get people he feels comfortable with. And I realize that Wagner plays defense, so that, I get that. But Mariota did a great job teaching him. I saw someone post, they said, yeah, Mariota came back. He could have tried to go someplace else and competed to be a starter, or he could come to back to Washington, collect his $8 million and work on his QB coach resume. So I'm very happy about those three people coming back. Very happy.
Yeah.
Everything else is just, it's fringe to me at this point because I don't know enough about the players. So
nailed it. Let's see what happens.
All right. Is there anything else? is there anything else we want to talk about? Is there anything that we missed that maybe we thought we might want to talk about, or is there anything that surfaced about any of the players we did talk about that you want to one last thing that you want to throw in?
I think we missed one of our signings. Did you mention Jonathan Jones, the cornerback? Not much to say about him. Like, I'm just seeing he's a 1-year deal.
I
Came
did.
from New
I-
England.
Yeah,
I missed that. You're right, Joe. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
you-
I missed that.
But I don't think there's much to say about him.
Yeah, I'm just reading something real quick. He can
I
play
did-
inside
Rob
and
did
out.
talk about him.
He can play inside and out. It's a 1-year deal. Shocker. So there's no long-term risk. And
We
the
just
same
lost a
way with
cornerback too,
offensive
didn't
line,
we?
you can never have too many good cornerbacks. So he
Yep.
can't be any worse than the last cornerbacks we've had with St.
Jeez.
Juice, who's now in San Diego, and Forbes, wherever he's playing. So it's an upgrade as far as I'm concerned. And I don't even know anything about the guy.
Yeah, that was all. That was the only one that I saw that I didn't think we'd mention. But other than that, I think we nailed this opening day.
Nice catch on that, Joe. Nice catch. Yeah,
Keep me honest.
so a very exciting opening day, opening 3 days. I mean, the 2 days of the legal tampering is what they call it. And I think Washington is off to a good start. Like I said, I'm never going to be too high on some of these moves because we don't know how it's going to play out. I've been burned too many times over the years. But I probably went up a tick in optimism away from pessimism. I realize that's a low bar, but I'll take it. Yeah, I'm not to Joe's level yet, but I'm working on it. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid yet. But anything else you guys want to finish up on?
I'm
Wow.
good.
All right. Silence is approval. So that wraps episode 2 of our podcast. We're happy you found us. Remember to click the like button, click subscribe. That would be really cool. Tell your friends. I don't know, whatever. Spread the word. We greatly appreciate it. We can't pay you because none of us have any money, but do it for the joy of the game or something. And we'll be back next week when we'll talk about whatever. I don't know what we'll talk about then because I'm sure a lot's going to happen in the next week, and we'll let the news happen, and then we'll talk about it because we're not into super big predictions here.
Super profound. So yeah.
Right? I mean, that's it. So until next week, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. And hail, right? Hail.
Raise hail.
Hail.